Nishith, I'm so excited to talk to you. This is the first time we are having a conversation online and and I have the privilege of interviewing you. Before I get into Locus, you have a very interesting background and you were doing very interesting stuff. And you hadn't told me that you have a patents in machine learning. So first you tell me about your background and what got you to start Locus.
A lot of serendipity. I mean, we tell this as the first thing to all our clients also that I have zero background in logistics. We were building a women's safety app. And how did all that came about is that the thing I enjoy the most is building, right? So I'd gone to BITS Pilani, and there one of the best parts is that you actually do not have a concept of attendance, right? At best, attendance can, be counted for 5%, but it's definitely not an eligibility criteria, right? Like nobody's trying to score 95% in an engineering exam anyway. So you could like easily drop in, drop out of classes. So I did a lot of work in experimental physics. I'm actually a published researcher in the area of optics. Like we build like a photon tunneling microscope.
What
Uh,
does that even mean?
Basically, when you take a camera and you take a picture, it looks at everything together, right?
Hmm.
In an electron tunneling or a photon tunneling, what you do is effectively you shoot a beam of photons at each point, x, y, x1, y1, x2, y2, and then you compute the reflection back, right? So like a typical 1 micron resolution commercial system costs about like $500,000, and we were able to replicate it in $25,000, right? So I really enjoy building. As a matter of fact, in the Locus office, there's a hardware lab where like a bunch of us, often on the weekends or at night, like hack around stuff. Like a bunch of these lights and all, like, we have a little API scripts in the background. Yeah. So we have in general like a hardware hacking culture even at Locus. Right. So yeah, I love building stuff. Like I started by doing in experimental physics, and then I got reasonably interested around the rise of natural language, machine learning. I did a few internships, the summer projects. Then I started working in Amazon, where I got a very unique opportunity to move to the AWS machine learning team, right? And that's
Hmm.
where I met my co-founder as well, Geet. So both of us come from different schools. He's from Kharagpur, I'm from Pilani. So we didn't meet in college, but we met while working at Amazon, and we worked together for 2 years. And the AWS ML team experience was a pretty cool one. Like I was more on the science side, he was more on the platform side. And there's a lot of code in that platform, say around k-means clustering and all. That's actually handwritten by us, right? And that was a great learning experience. And somewhere post the Uber incident, and that topic was actually just close to both Geet and I for personal reasons. Like my father is a trauma specialist in psychiatry, so he was involved with a few of those episodes, right? And this was a lot of like family conversation for us as well as for Geet. And we built out this app called Ride Safe,
Hmm.
which route deviation feature. We used to call it real time route deviation detection. You know why?
Wow.
Because it's R2D2.
Hmm.
Like we were the stereotypical definition, you could get at. So we built up this system. We got a lot of, actually at that point attention. It was just a, to be honest, media friendly topic. IIT BITS kids built out this women's safety app, right? But interestingly, the on-demand economy was really coming up at that point. So we built out this app called RideSafe, which had this feature of route deviation, real-time route deviation detection. So for the first time, instead of just looking at a tracking link, you could actually automatically detect if the person is not on the tracking link, right? If they're
Hmm.
not actually going home without defining a route. So imagine, Shraddha, you go to another city, right? You don't know the area. Typically you will take like a red eye flight. You get down, you put that I'm going to my hotel. And then the app used to constantly monitor, is the driver taking you to your hotel through any rational route, right? Because a bunch of these untowards incidents used to happen on a deviation.
Yeah.
And this got adopted by the on-demand economy. To be honest, like the first time when those guys called us, like we were young, there was a lot of utopian hubris in us, and my first response was actually that, do you not know tracking systems exist? Do you not know there is a bunch of GPS systems, fleet management systems? Why are you hacking a B2C app, right? And as in most cases, it turned out we were the idiots, right? And we were missing that critical nuance that they don't want to sit and track 10 guys. They want to sit and track 100 guys and the 10 exceptions that are coming.
Ah.
Everybody has been really focused on supply chain visibility. There is a huge world that exists beyond the visibility into decision making.
Hmm.
To be honest, we also have this internal view where we can see thousands of trucks moving across, and sometimes it feels cool to get a cold one, put your legs up on the table, right? But what do I do with that information? Like, why is that still a dependency on a human, right? If you look at it, deciding in logistics is basically factoring in a bunch of real-time variables which are changing very, very fast to make a multi-objective decision. This is actually very close to how algorithmically stocks are traded, right? And nobody even imagines that those stocks, algorithmic trading can be done by humans. The maths is not new, but the stock market got connected. And if we think of it, that's what digital maps and supply chain visibility is doing. That the first
Hmm.
that Bijli failure, that the first stage is that the supply chain is getting electrified with this visibility, and that's
Hmm.
great. But this is, to be honest, the starting point, right? Like, we think you can build an algorithmic chief supply chain officer or an assistant for him, right? Which augments him in all his daily tactical as well as strategic decision making, because this is a problem statement fundamentally suited for algorithms. It was being done by humans because there wasn't enough data. And the second most important factor, you personally were never a part of supply chain. If you
Hmm.
think of it, like you and I 10 years back, right? We would just go to a shop and pull a package from there. Today, what is the difference between your package and your message notification? Both
Hmm.
gets to you, right? Like, this has changed something which was practically static for 70 years. Like, nobody was worrying about 24-hour deliveries. Like, post containerization, 70 years, we had 7 day of last mile replenishment time. You wait for 5 days, get an average demand and ship it out. Maybe winters and summers route will change, baki sab broadly is same. And that's what has changed. Like, you and I have entered the supply chain, dramatically increasing the complexity and hence increasing the need of decision making. And that's what Locus does. That we're a
Hmm.
technology platform that will plug into your supply chain as an enterprise and start automating all the human decision making that was there. Right? So your route planning, road planning, address corrections, network planning, and the idea is to do that not in just ideal world, but in actually India, Jakarta, Ho Chi Minh, right, where both of us write addresses completely different. Like, every single time my mom writes opposite Hanuman Mandir and I write opposite HDFC Bank, and now instead of that postman there needs to be a little algorithm which understands that both of these guys mean the same thing.
Hmm.
That's effectively what we're trying to build.
Take us through someone who was operating by example, I'm saying, example of stage wise, pre-locus and post-locus, pre-locus world and post-locus world. Uska step by step example.
So let's talk about groceries, right? I
Hmm.
think the most topical thing, like, none of us till 3 months back have ever worried about how our groceries reaches us, but now we definitely care for it, right? So let's talk about groceries, right?
Hmm.
So let's take a large grocer, e-grocer operating in India, right?
Hmm.
We run 75% of all organized groceries. So now this person, every day, because it could be a Sunday, or because there could be a new news, or there could be a long weekend coming, this company has, say, 50 distribution centers across 25 cities, right?
Hmm.
In some cities one center, in some cities 3 4 centers. Each of these centers need to fulfill a dynamic demand somewhere between 500 to 1000.
Hmm.
Okay, the last decade in supply chain, you would have heard a lot of these words about demand forecasting,
Hmm.
right? Everything was about forecasting. Let's predict it out, right? I think at this point, most of us are accepting genuine defeat against the randomness of universe. right? And what we are saying is that instead of having these heavy structured supply chains which need to be planned for 3 to 6 months, let's
Hmm.
build ultra nimble, agile stuff which can actually react in 12 to 24 hours. There's no
Hmm.
need to predict the future because you can't anyway do it, right? I can maybe predict my winter and summer demand, but a large e-grocer in India cannot predict whether today from this area there will be 500 or 700 orders.
Yeah.
So now that we have established that this is the problem, that I'm going to face 500 and 1,000 orders, and the problem is, like, Shradha Sharma has a lot of followers on Twitter. There is no way I can delay her order,
Hmm.
right? Big issue,
Hmm.
because this is not a supply chain going to retail stores. That if something
Hmm.
goes wrong, there will be an escalation. This is
Hmm.
going to consumers. If something is wrong, you will hear it on Twitter.
Hmm.
So before either, you would plan your resources for 1,000 orders, your max capacity, right? Effectively having higher cost per delivery, or you would take, if you are a cost conscious company, you would plan it for your average or minimal load. And when you have high loads, the one time that you really need to impress your customers, you will suffer SLA delays, right?
Ah.
Because 1,000 orders going to 500 homes in 20 vehicles with temperature and other stuff can have up to 1 trillion possible combinations.
Hmm.
No way you can select an optimal combination by doing it on pen and paper and using the law of averages, which
Hmm.
was the thing is, prior to 2010 it was working because your demand itself was not that fluctuating.
Hmm.
Your demand is ultra fluctuating, not just in B2C segment, but also in B2B segment. So a large company like Unilever now needs to continuously evaluate their channel mix, that how much will it be shipped through e-commerce, how much through general trade, how much through modern trade.
Hmm.
And to that one store, now there is no one Vaseline. There is Vaseline, there's Vaseline Gold, there's Vaseline Intensive Care, Vaseline for your face, Vaseline which looks like a fruit salad, right? Now I have 5 SKUs.
Hmm.
I cannot stock 50 units of 5 of them, right? So I need to stock less and I need faster replenishment. So your demand is very dynamic. So that paper and pen in a before scenario would either lead to SLA misses or increased cost. And this is effectively what we bring in, right? Uh, in all fairness, I didn't think of the next part when we started, but it's actually now coming out as a very strong value add. On an average, we also help you reduce 22% of your fuel, uh, which is just not a cost optimization, because that cost also gets factored in vehicle and all. It's also a huge green initiative. There
Yeah.
is a significant quantifiable reduction in your carbon emission per delivery.
Hmm.
In many of our customers, from an average reattempt of delivery of 25 to 30%, we have taken it down to 5%. Why? By simply asking, hey Shraddha, when do you want your package, and having a backend sophisticated enough that I can actually deliver to you that package in your 15-minute preference at a cost efficient manner. For one of the largest e-grocers in India, Big Basket, we have delivered 10 on a case study, research case study, 10 million packages on a 90-minute SLA at a percentage of 99.5 across cities for all
Wow.
traffic in India.
Wow. Good. Yeah. Yeah.
Because it wasn't that India, Southeast Asia cannot use automation. It was that the maths was very simple. The maths was designed for spherical chickens in vacuum. They don't exist. Chickens are not spherical and friction is real, right? You need to design your software for it. So this is a contrast of a pre and post, and why we are able to solve it today.
From what you are describing, I feel this is a global, this is not just India, but it's a global solution all over the world. This must be, required. So are you operating across all geographies?
Absolutely. So apart from India, where we have teams in Delhi, Bombay, and Bangalore, we have small teams like 10-member teams in Jakarta, Ho Chi Minh, San Fran, and East Coast.
Wow.
Just before the COVID, we were setting up our EU operations. So we had set up our entity and all, and we look forward to launching a team next year over there, right? But today we have reasonable presence in Asia, as in Southeast Asia, and India and by Indian subcontinent we also include like Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, right? Middle East, and next year is when we're gonna look at Europe. And right now, one of our most interesting regions is North America. I think North America has also demonstrated, especially the logistics sector, an insane amount of resilience in this time, right? And when we asked them why, right, like we saw fury of activity in logistics in North America, right? Their thing was very simple. Every 3-4 years since last 20 years, we consistently had a disruption. 2017 was ELD, big deal. This is one more,
Wow.
right? Nothing is stopping, right? So there are a lot of specific tailwinds, sure, for tech, logistic tech, right? But just as business operations, right? Like the propensity, the mindset. And we sell, for example, a lot in distribution sector, and there we are seeing like parity to what intuitive sense would be. But some of the companies in core logistics sectors are actually demonstrating increased purchasing power and far more resilience than we would have than our limited business knowledge would have expected.
Two young Indian entrepreneurs, you guys have built a product which is being used world over, and that's phenomenal. Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah, yeah. How much time did it take for you to launch Locus and establish yourself all over?
Well, that's a very interesting question, and as I answer that, I need to thank my angel and early investors. Right, we started in 2015 when
Hmm.
if you go back during that time, the peak debate on Twitter was whether an MVP should be 6 weeks or 9 months. Uh, I think it took us 6 months to hire the first 2-3 members of the team. We were like all either like senior engineers or PhDs. It took us 12 months to build like a first, rough Python, prototype solution that we have figured out the maths, but not the software, right? And it took us in 18 months to get our first anything out that can be touched to a customer, and almost 2 years of like core IP development to get our first real customer production deployment line, right? But then the next 2 year we saw like almost logarithmic scale. Like for example, one of the most interesting KPIs for us is how many unique locations we visit. I may be delivering 10,000 items at one location, but how many unique locations I visit, because that's how we get our revenue, and more importantly, that's how we got our data, right? So it took us like the full that first 2 years of development to get to something like 800,000 orders a day. Then in the next year we climbed to 100,000 orders a day at 100x, and then the next year we again climbed to million orders per day. And since
Wow.
then we're seeing a few 100% YOY growth. But yeah, like it took us 2 years to get to 1,000 orders a day, and from there it took us 2 years to go 1,000x at a million orders, million new locations a day. So
Yeah,
yeah,
no,
it took
but
a lot of
interesting
time.
that you're saying this because today morning I had a conversation with Anand from CleverTap, and he
Oh, yeah.
said that his MVP was 3 years in making. Of course, he was talking to customers, building, getting feedback, but 3 years. And what you are saying is to get your IP in place.
Yeah.
It took 2 years, and one of the things he was saying is to get a right product. Don't rush it,
Like
and
Anand
that's
is a product guy. Like and if you look at both the businesses, for him it was the finesse of the product. For me, it was the IP. But basically, both of us were entering established things, right? Like we could not be the first in the market, so our only option was to be the best in the market, right? I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying quick MVPs is bad. Like they're
yeah,
perfectly
yeah,
valid
yeah.
certain set of problem statements. For us, like route optimization wasn't new. It's a 100-year-old problem, right? Like everybody has heard of this traveling salesman thing. Right? Our thing was to make it work in the real world. So we really didn't have an incentive to be the first in the market. Like we sell tech to other public market companies who weren't really waiting for us to be born or have a investor pitch deck to show technology adoption. They would only adopt if there are core KPIs being saved, right?
Mm.
For us, there was a lot of incentive to be, to have at least a significant delta at the day of zero launch. Like we don't need to be breadth first, but we had to be very, very depth first.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like
That.
only years did we have, I think, or around the third year mark or second to third year mark, did our engineering count increase our DS count. Like we had 2, 3 DS and 2, 3 engineers for a really long time.
Now that you're saying about the depth of the product, but one of the conversations that we had, and I was very excited that as a startup, as a young startup, you onboarded PhDs. And let's talk about that because we don't hear many PhD guys being onboarded in startups. Now, finally, we are having this conversation on camera.
Camera, like exactly.
So tell us about Locus and all the PhDs that you got.
No, we have a huge respect, genuine need, as well as like clear cut deliverable outputs by them, right? When you get a PhD talent, you're not really looking at just matching the dissertation. Sure, domain expertise, but two core things that really that you're able to borrow from them is one, genuinely deep problem solving skills, and second, the commitment to hit at it. Right? So for
Hmm.
example, one of our really core solutions is converting an address to a lat log,
Hmm.
anywhere written address, because without that you can't start digitizing the supply chain itself, right? Shraddha, it took us 2 years, 3 months, three different attempts, two different teams to get the first version out.
Wow.
But today
Wow.
it's the starting point of 60% of my revenue, right? And
Wow.
anybody, like including me, would have been tempted to give up.
Hmm.
These
Hmm.
guys have that vision, that commitment, have seen sustained gradual progress, have seen the multiplier effects of that, right? Yeah, so for us, like it's an extremely critical thing, and as a matter of fact, we have a policy of ignoring the weaknesses and doubling down on the strengths when it comes to IP, right? So if we think that someone has a better IP and they're significantly ahead and it's not core to us, we don't need to be like, it's not an ego question, we would partner with them, right? And on the ones we are strong, we actually increase our DS, right? Like we are right now at least a skip level ahead of a lot of literature, and our like we're always. And one of the good things is that I think data science is also very like, this universe is a pretty small universe, like founders and investors, there's a lot of reference checks that work, everybody has worked with everybody somewhere or the other, right? And it's typically, like, at least in our metrics, getting the first time hiring right is far easier in data science than other places, right? And they have been extremely core pillars for us. Like, we would not be without our data science. Like, I have done more maths in Locus in last 5 years than I did in 5 years at Bits. So we came to Locus after two sort of B2C ventures like PinChat and RightSafe. And like, I was 25 then, and I won't at all shy away from the fact that during those days it was even cool for me to write like just a founder in the signature, right? But by the time we came to Locus, a lot of that had gone away, right? So we actually did a reasonable amount of primary research. Like, like, what I mean by that is, like, for a period of 3 months, because and that time, when you're going to ask a CXO, he'll be like, yeah, everything is automated. But when the package comes at my home, I am signing on a piece of paper. Where is the like, what's happening? Have you noticed that silent change in your life in last 3-4 years? You're
Yeah.
not signing couriers on a paper anymore, right? And for that, we actually, like, we've slept with the truck drivers under the truck on the roadways, outside on the highways, right? Like, we've been at Bhiwandi, Nilmangla, like, places like 40 kilometers outside the city boundary, like, spent days, like, just a lot of glucose biscuits and chai, right? Because we wanted to understand that, I was an engineer, right? For me, route optimization was a solved problem. We did a course in it in college called Graphs and Network, right? There was a volume of literature available. So it took me 100 days to first convince myself that this is not a solved problem, boss. It's only like a very simplified theoretical version of it is a solved problem. And right now our customers ask us, so for example, during COVID, right, what has happened is a bunch of warehouses get shut down and open on a far more frequent basis than a typical, because of containment zones and things, right? And now people want to optimize their supply chain in real time across multi-legs. This match doesn't even exist even with us. Like, we have no shame in admitting it. Like, as a matter of fact, like anything close to it does not exist anywhere. We have some versions where we are experimenting, right? We are trying out even different hardware, like using, graphics cards, x86 TPUs, right? But it's really, really interesting. I do believe that in a period of 5 years, like, we would get to a point where you should be able to move up any package or a person from any point A to any point B without any human decisions involved, right?
Mm.
There will be humans involved in driving and actual mechanical movement, but not in the decision making. And yeah, like yeah, it's a pretty interesting time to be here. Like, it's like, for example, otherwise, like one of my other, like, I like aviation, right? But nothing has changed in commercial aviation in last 40 years. As a kid, my Delhi Bombay flight is shorter than it was today because they didn't care about fuel economy, right? Logistics is in that 10, 20 years period, in a century where it's gonna, like, post containerization, it's that part, right? So even if you have an ADHD on problem solving, you can't finish it because everything around you is changing, right? Every time I go to, like, one of my public market customers, they have three new people we have never met, and they have new problem statements. We have to always debate, like, revenue and product, as a matter of fact, is always fighting, right? So good problems, but definite problems. Yeah, so it's a
Yeah,
pretty exciting.
yeah, and that comes across that you're enjoying the process. Yeah,
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 definitely.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm enjoying the process. Like, I feel sharper today than I felt that, when I was 25, 26. None of us are Alzheimer's setting in. And like a lot of every day is actually about, like, just problem solving over, like, pointless politics. So yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Nishit, take us through, uh, how you onboarded your investors, because you have very good, interesting set of investors. Take us through the journey, and also the angels who came
Yeah.
in very early and believed in what you were building.
And I think our angels have a very, like, our angels, and we had a very early Series A with Xfinity and Bloom, right? On the, we actually, like, I can show my Series A deck, right? My Series A deck didn't have a single number, right? Like, it had about, talked about maths and IP, but no revenue projections, no cost, nothing. So let's talk. Let's, so, like, I've Amit Ranjan, who's the founder of SlideShare, is one of my first early angel investors, right? Sheetal from GrowX, right? Um, Manish Singhal, who's now with Pi, and now Pi is also an investor in us, right? But Manish, Sheetal, Amit, Bala and Shailesh from Xfinity, and Sanjay from Bloom, right? They were amazing. I mean, not they are amazing. Like, and to be like today, like, like, it's not about voting rights. Like, I think I've pointed that, so I have no incentive to really say anything not factually correct, right? But I think we have been fortunate, and
Hmm.
what that was that these people helped us reference the next set of investors. So as we onboarded Next, Recruit, we got great partners there. We onboarded Recruit, Ship, right? And then eventually on the Series B.
Hmm.
So it's be like it's especially the early investors. They were super patient with us. I remember panicking a lot during the 18-month mark that we don't have production customers. Demos keep on extending. What is this? I thought people should buy in 3 weeks. It's been 3 months. The enterprise is not closing the deal, right? And Shailesh from Xfinity, I mean, he has built the whole Infosys business, right? And it's like like, yeah, I remember one time he literally doing this in the board meeting, right? And it was actually a lot of our investors who taught us about enterprise sales. We were developers, like, right? We understood developers, we understood tech, we understood maths, right? If I can break a business into a matrix and framework, we understood that. right? But we did not at all understood enterprise ways of functioning. Uh, Right. Our investors have helped us in certain hiring as well. Like, you remember for my, like, for example, when I was hiring my head of finance, like I have no knowledge in finance and there's nobody else in the team also. So how can I pretend to interview someone, right? So I must have put like one of my investors at least easily through like 10 to 12 1 hour interview sessions.
Wow.
Right? Out of which, according to him, I should have hired four. Like, and we just doesn't right. But the guy didn't give up. Like, they've been super supportive in terms of time, and just not causing stress. Right?
Hmm.
I think that's actually something I've learned COVID also. I wanted to share this on the enterprise customer side, right? Uh, like somebody was asking me recently, what's my lesson out of the crisis? And I'm like, I don't think we're out of the crisis yet, so it would be too early to talk about any lesson, right? But I do have certain observations, right?
Hmm.
And one of them has been that how how a lot of how one of the great parts about dealing with enterprise customers is that tough conversations don't need to be acrimonious.
Yeah.
Right? Everybody is out there to build a rational business. They're not playing a zero sum game. They do not
Yeah.
think when you have to lose, right? We have never suffered a single bad debt from an enterprise or delayed anything. As a matter of fact, some of our largest enterprise customers, like some of the largest groups in India, actively reached out to us that do you need help with 0% finance, we can't afford for you guys to go down, right? uh, when people wanted to negotiate rates, like we've had a lot of tough conversations in the last 2 months, but not necessarily acrimonious conversations, right? And I'm definitely extremely appreciative of the efforts of my customer success team who put in their time in building those relationships, right? But yeah, it was a lot of like, how do I put it, like I won't say faith in humanity restored because it wasn't really like lost type, but I think I had a lot of prejudices in my head because I had never really dealt with, we are still very first principles maths guys, right? And it was just such a positive experience over the last 2 3 days. Like these were tough quarters, but it was not an acrimonious quarter, right? As a matter
Yeah.
of fact, we've grown far closer to many of our customers. We are now active part of their operation changes. They had to move overnight from slotted deliveries to slotless deliveries. There were operational changes, right? And we are now very close part of many of our customers 21 roadmap. So yeah, that way I think like this was I think it was a tangent to what you asked, but yeah, I thought it was relevant.
Nishit, tell me now that you are in this logistics space, and we've seen so many investments in the logistics space, but overall funding is down right now. Some sectors are doing well. We are hearing about edtech, and of course, logistics also seems to be like the backbone. Uh, how do you see investments, and how do you see opportunities in the logistic tech? What do you call it? Logistic tech only, huh? In the logistic tech space.
Uh, okay, so first let me tell you the market facts, and then we
Huh,
can.
huh, huh.
We have to break companies into three categories. So something like edtech, where there's just a lot more of investment activity and at very good terms, right? The second would be where which are sectors which are not seeing like an overnight instant tailwind, but a lot of first principles suggest very genuine sustained tailwinds, and there are very factual signs of it, right? So they're seeing an increased level of interest and at the same terms as pre-COVID.
Hmm.
And then there's the third segment, which is seeing a decreased interest. Decreased interest directly leads to, not so optimal terms. I think logistics takes in the second, right? We are definitely
Hmm.
not in the like is the interest something like in video conferencing? No, absolutely not. But is it more than where it was in December 2019? Yes, right? And are people only just looking for attractive deals? No, I think there's a very genuine interest. We have had a lot of good new conversations, right? uh, yeah, so that's right. And my view is also that I think it's fair it's absolutely fair that I would not compare logistics. Like no enterprise business should see tailwinds at the same speed as a B2C business,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
So yeah, so for us, so that's where I would also put it, and we are seeing lot of interest. We are not actively, looking out to raise right now. Thankfully, like as we were discussing earlier, like we have a significant Southeast Asia exposure as well, and in a way we saw a reasonable impact, or we're hearing about COVID about 2 months, if not a full quarter earlier than when it completely hit India, right? So we are reasonably financially prepared right now. We have an outlook of over 20-24 months, right? But
Very
somewhere,
good.
yeah, somewhere next year, after basically, so yeah, now as a company, we're always looking to do more milestone driven raises than runway driven raises, right? We think some of those key milestones will close by Q4, and if they do, then on Q1 to basically double down on those experiments, we will step out. And I hope some of this, I think this interest will be there. And in full transparency, something that goes in my head as a FOMO is that what if some of these funds make their only bet in the logistic tech now? But I think I'm ready to. We're okay to take that risk and play out the patient game.
And I've learned something new from you. Milestone based funding rather than runway based funding. No, you said? Ah, good. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I
Or
mean,
G.
see, we're an enterprise business, right? So if you have more than 12 months of runway, there's technically always an option for us to be unprofitable. I mean, for
Hmm.
most good
Hmm.
businesses, right? Like most software businesses run at a reasonable gross margin. Like per unit profitability is not our concern, right? So it's always like I think after you cross a certain base stage, it would become more about milestones. Like if those milestones is not working, then money will not solve my problem. Right
Yeah.
now, I have money to run my experiments.
The number of customers that you have, like the number of customers that you serve across the globe. And second thing is that if I can get a peep, we all can get a peeping into your boardroom. What's the big dream? What's the big number? What's the big thing that you are chasing? And what do you talk to your investors about?
Our secret sauce is our maths, and even if I want, I can't explain it in 10 minutes, right? So I'm with the rest of the numbers. So we have two legs of customers. So we have 70 customers which are for our revenue, and we maintain a
Wow.
20 customer bed which is not for a revenue but for our product development. So they are
Hmm.
more experimental features, experimental sets. But we have 70 customers. I hope eventually we grow to 200 customers out of the Fortune 500, right? And are able to play a very meaningful change for each of them. Uh, if you go into the Locus boardroom, right? So I think it's a three-part thing right now, right? We're definitely very focused on how to get to $100 million and at about $100 million run rate, and at T-1 hit actually EBITDA profitability while growing with that scale. The second, this is actually something we don't, to be honest, talk a lot about outside, right? Is once we reach to be at that scale to truly think about a data platform. Right?
Hmm.
A lot of people talk about data, but we were building the AWS platform. Like people misunderstand what's big data. Like you can solve terabytes of and these billions of rows right on your iPhone X. Like big data is a few million times that scale, right? And processed in a few, right? So once we reach there is when we would, right now we want to be all focused on data processing, right? As I said, augment the human decision making. And my personal, and this is where the final state is that, over the next 7 to 10 years, can we actually play the role of a chief supply chain officer for Fortune 500 company? Can we build a product broad and deep enough that can cover the multimodal and cross boundary expanse that we can move and plan for any package movement? I mean, I don't mean it, like as a really legalese that there won't be a CS.
Yeah.
Product evolve, right? And that's our, and like, like if I take you around my office, you'll actually see it scribbled at various boards. Like a lot of everyday decision making, we make sure, like for example, enterprise customer ask, right? Is it aligning to our vision of, unifying decision making in logistics? If yes, maybe we'll do it. If not, it's okay. Right.
Wow.
So this is not just like, a random writing on the wall. This is like a very guiding compass to make everyday decisions. So that's our core eventual thing, right? I think we would need like revenue is just a proxy for scale. We would
Yeah.
need that build that data platform, and we would need that data platform, which in combination with our data processing platform will act as our chief supply chain.
So now we are in money matters. So you have to uh, tell me, what does money personally mean to you?
Sure. I mean, I have this conversation actually with a lot of our senior hires, right? Uh, I personally believe happiness does not depend on the value of variables, but it depends on the number of variables. What I
Hmm.
mean by that is my happiness will increase if money is no more a variable in my life, right? Over whatever that value of money is, right? So, it's not about gyan. Let's convert it into practical
हाँ,
talk.
tell me, मुझे simply बताओ.
Right? So for me, I think money means more about financial independence, right?
Yes.
So right now I don't have kids, and if I'm living in a city like Bangalore, right? If perpetually every year inflation adjusted, somebody gives me say 25 to 30 lakhs, maybe a little more if I have kids, I will live a very empowered life, experiencing whatever I want.
Hmm.
Travel, purchases, Ivy League education for my kids, and all. So any piece of sum which once invested will give me just this amount of money, I'm happy with, and I'm talking absolutely transparently. So like $1 million invested honestly will generate you over 50 lakhs, annually, which gives me financial independence. Now beyond that, and that's what gives us the freedom. Like, so for example, at this point, we care about whether we can build, we can build the chief supply chain officer or not. I really won't care at that point what's my dilution. Like any money beyond this, I really couldn't. Like, yes, it will have some impact, but not a meaningful impact. Right? Broadly, to anybody, you can impact money in three ways. One is when you don't have it for survival. So for a bachelor in Bangalore, I would say it's about 20-25,000. You can rent a basic apartment, you have internet, food, water, you have enough money to jump to your next life, right? Second is your RHS, where you can go to any restaurant, not look at the right hand side, right? So this is where the experience of the thing. And the third is what commonly is known as the FU money, right? Which I think is the amount which invested wisely gives you your RHS money. That's it. Right? That's what money means to me, right? That's the amount of money I want to earn in those, if I change countries and all, adjust for all of those. But this is what my concept is. I think right now I'm at the RHS line or even F line. That's it. So once the idea is to remove money as a variable, the idea is never to optimize for money.
This is just the start. We are going to discuss a lot of things and have regular conversation, because I feel someone like you should also be talking, and we should see more of you, because there's so much that you could add to so many young people who would be, in Bits Pilani or wherever in the country, trying to build something very interesting, something hatke and genuinely, trying to solve difficult problems. So yeah, so we should talk more.